This theme, Reimagine Toledo, for me is loaded with emotion, and I'm thinking of it in its grandest terms. Here's where the emotion comes from. I was born here. I was raised here. My parents are both buried here. I went to school here. I married the girl down the street, my high school sweetheart. I've been married 45 years. Here, we had 2 little girls. We had 2 little babies. They both live in Chicago now. We had 2 little girls. We raised them here. We went to school here. I struggled forever here. I went in business in 1978, BC, before computers. I wanted to be a writer, and I felt compelled to go to New York, but I knew you'll never be able to raise a family. So I thought, I want to be a writer in Toledo. So I went to work at 970 Spitzer Building. I didn't even have enough money for a desk. My uncle loaned me his desk. So this is an emotional topic for me. And I started writing. To be honest, I wrote in longhand, like on a legal pad. I didn't really even have the typing skills. And I wrote, and I had a quota of 2,500 words per day, which was a lot. But then I would do this, and then I would take my writings to a place in South Toledo. It was called Richard's Dictation. And these wonderful women who were masters, and they had IBM Selectric typewriters. There wasn't even spell checking. They would key all my stuff in. Then I would go pick it up. I would go home at night. And then my wife and I, if we put our little babies to bed, we would sit down at the kitchen table for hours. She would proofread it. And I would sit there with a little bottle of paste, an X-Acto knife, and little toothpicks, and make all of our little changes in this text. And we did that for years. It was exhausting. So, but then out comes the Apple computer, the Apple IIe, and that pretty much changed our lives. Well, anyhow, I've got a lifetime of experience and emotions tied up in this Toledo and the notion of reimagining Toledo. Hell, I wrote a book 30 years ago, which nobody read. I spent 1.5 years in a room writing the thing, sent it out. Not much happened. But for now, I'd like to cover about 30 years and break it all down into 3 kind of basic lessons that I think I stumbled across that I thought might be helpful, particularly to young people who live here, who want to stay living here, and who ultimately would indeed like to reimagine Toledo. Okay, so my little themes are technology. Remember starting out with the toothpicks, and it had to do with technology, what I learned about that, philosophically, about imagination, big time imagination, and combining imagination with technology, combining art and technology in many ways, and also about the most important thing you need in any business if it's going to be great, and that's the people. And what I found out, discovered, I'd say the hidden gold that's undiscovered here in Toledo. So this is kind of very personal. Now, I mentioned my message is primarily delivered and intended for young people, but I didn't mean 20 or 30. I don't want to discriminate, but here's the reality. When you're 20 or 30 years old, you're still searching for something. You don't have the answers. You don't have it figured out. But you know one thing for absolute certainty today. You are not going to be protected by the big company, by the big union, and government. You have one unalterable, naked choice. You will control your own destiny, or someone else will. Let me repeat that. You will control your own destiny, or someone else will. So my little suggestion is before you or we reimagine Toledo, if you're a young person, reimagine yourself first. Reimagine yourself. Reimagine yourself around something that personally for you gives you a great deal of meaning and purpose and passion. Because if you do that, you'll be a candidate for something that I'd really love for you to do, is start your own business. Start your own business. That's how we're going to recreate Toledo. We need entrepreneurs, for God's sake. Start your own business. Reimagine yourself around something to get you a sense of meaning and purpose. And in the process of doing that, indirectly, you'll create and you'll reimagine Toledo. But this purpose and this passion that only you can find within yourself is absolutely critical. I hope this reaches you. Because doing this, particularly in a world where technology is so dominant and prevalent, requires an enormous amount of work, an enormous amount of energy, an enormous amount of frustration. And the only way to ultimately make it happen is to throw energy at it. And the only thing that gives you energy is this sense of inner meaning and purpose. Okay, now I got two little reference points. My first, I would hope that everybody in this room has gone to YouTube and at some point in their lives seen Steve Jobs' Stanford University commencement speech. I think Will's got it on his website. That made me feel good. That is home base. This is your catechism. This is your Magna Carta. Go there first. Watch that. Watch that 4 times a year, because that is a foundation, and it's probably classic advice. Because in the end, you're going to find where that's going to lead you to is a conversation with yourself. Now, let me be clear. That's not kibitzing with your buddies on Twitter. That's not hanging around with your friends on Facebook. That is you alone, by yourself, with the table, ideally a glass of wine, sitting down with a napkin and a piece of paper saying, this is what I want to do with my life. This is what gives me meaning and purpose. Does that make sense? Do that. Do that again and again and again. I did that for 10 years. That's what made it. We used a lot of technology, but that. And guess what? Other people came to that same conclusion. It became massive. It became powerful. It was jet fuel. It's now jet fuel for like 100 people. That's it. It's really not about technology. It's about this conversation with yourself. But technology is really important, but we're going to back into that baby. Okay, personal history. I'm going to go through this, hopefully, with speed. I started in 1978, as I said, BC, before computers. I told you the whole story about all the time involved. I was at the Spitzer building. We went through all this difficulty, just composition, putting things together without crushing yourself with time. So the Apple IIe came out circa, probably the Apple in the late 70s, but I didn't get one till like 1980, 81. This was massive. Like, we were calling our friends and relatives and so forth and say, come over, you got to look at this thing. For me, it was a no-brainer because, boom, I saved 20 hours a week. I'm getting sleep. I can actually breathe. This is unbelievable. And we actually can be able to compose on our own desktop and our own screen. Unreal. Don't have to drive all around. My goal, by the way, in doing all this, in this business thing, was not to like be a zillionaire or anything. It was very simple. I wanted to control the destiny, my destiny. I wanted to control the destiny of our little family. So it was very simple. I want my girls to go to the same grade school. I want them to be able to go to the same high school. And I don't want any son of a bitch telling me where I'm going to live and when I got to move and all that. I just wanted to control the basic circumstances of my life. And I couldn't see any other way to do that, ultimately, other than do the business thing. Okay. So this Apple II comes. That's the first thing. Second thing, I'm downtown in this building with all these lawyers. And basically, this joint is ruled by corporations. Toledo's in this building. Boom, they got all these big corporate buildings. I'm in this little room. But got nothing else going, so about 2 or 3 times a week I go down to the corner, and they have what then is the first Radio Shack stores. You know, Radio Shacks, this Tandy, they actually had laptops in the mid-'80s, got one, snapped them up. But they had all these cool digital devices, and so when I would take a break from writing, which is kind of crushing, I'd go into this little store and I'd start looking at all this stuff. But over time, my big observation is, my God, they're building all these buildings, and we got 3 of these big corporations and all these banks. None of these guys ever walk into this store. This is strange. And then finally, an aha hits me. This can change everything. Nobody sees it. So concurrent with that, I'd always been addicted to this notion of futurity. Thomas Jefferson was all about futurity. My hero, modern day, was Alvin Toffler, who wrote like a dozen books on the future. I'm looking at all this, and I say, son of a gun, it's right in front of me. So out of thin air, I came out of a closet and sort of declared myself as a futurist. I had no clients or nothing. I just printed up a card, said Trend Lab, and a letterhead, and I started writing this publication and send it out for free all over the place. We literally hand-typed the envelopes and so forth. Nobody said a damn thing, but after a couple of years, people started calling on this. Point is, just imagine myself being in a business that I really wasn't in at all, but the act of actually making it physical, the card and the letterhead, kind of legitimized in my own mind and sort of psyched myself into doing something I really wasn't doing. Does that sound strange? But imagine, Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Think about your imagination, and that's what Toledo needs. So I started writing this publication called the Trend Lab Report, which is really all content, and started going out and giving little speeches and doing consulting about the future and so forth. And it worked out. I started to get clients. I wrote this thing, Toledo Toward 2000. My friend John Lasky gave me $2,500. It took about a year and a half to do it. But we sent it out, and truth be told, not a whole lot happened. Problem is, that was 1 year before the next big thing, 1984, the Mac came out, okay? That changed everything. That I didn't see. Okay, so we moved to Perrysburg. We get, we get the Mac in like 1985. But still, okay, now we're doing like consulting, we're doing writing, and truth be told, same old trap. I'm exhausted. It's about 80, 90 hours a week. I'm never around the house. I'm sick pretty much constantly, pretty much hit a brick wall. So I walked, and then I connected with, this young man, Becca, Jim Howden. He is my buddy. He became my partner right away. Now we got the power of 2. We're doing all these experiences. Hell, we went through 3 different business and consulting ideas, and then, only then, did we come up with the 3rd or 4th, which was this idea of an organizational learning map, which became huge. But it was all these experiments and all these failures. But the thing that maybe ultimately I made it is just total physical exhaustion, and realize a surgeon only makes money when he cuts. I learned that. You got to figure out how to scale. You got to transcend time. You got to transcend the calendar. And back to the Mac that was sitting there, what I discovered, because I really wasn't a tech guy, there's $10,000 worth of graphic capability locked up in this little Mac that we weren't really looking at. So we started using it. We had an inside tech guy, really wasn't an art guy, and we began prototyping and building what were learning maps. Problem is, it took a year and a half to do the first one. That was too tough. So we finally bit the bullet, and we hired a couple real-world artists, Bill and Ed, and we began cranking out this stuff. Company grew quite a bit, like 100% a year. It's over 100-some people now. And but that's how we got it. But without the technology, we would have been in big trouble. But we didn't have technology is our lodestone. We didn't have the use of technology as our principal priority. The thing that was inside of us was our purpose. The technology was just our purpose was to bring people together in a chaotic world that's loaded with all this technology. Our purpose was to bring people together to have a dialogue and a conversation, mainly within their companies, about the primal economic, technological, societal forces that were transporting their business, and to democratize all this information and contextualize it so that normal people, Johnny Overhauls, people with like an 8th grade education, could understand it and do something about it in their jobs and in their lives. There's a lot of philosophy there, but that's what it was. It was a lot of art. It was the classics. It was Socratic dialogue. It was analytics, which you need in business. It was trends. It combined futurity, all those things. But we had our purpose. Now, back to the technology. You got to think about Steve Jobs' commencement speech. Here's what he never told you. I think this was an artist that figured out computers. This was a guy that decided to live his life at an intersection. The intersection was art and technology. And he thought, damn it, I'm just not going to use a computer. I'm going to take this and make this thing not a computer, but something, a creative device. And that's how we kind of looked at this stuff. We weren't really technology guys, but we saw the possibility for creativity. And we saw this intersection where analytics and art and strategy and the classics and Socratic learning and dialogue, that we could have this 5-point intersection. These things were totally incompatible in the physical world, but what we found is in the virtual world, you can make it happen. So for us, technology was a massive lever. Little philosophy. Archimedes said, give me a lever and a fixed point, and I can change the world. And that's the possibility of technology. Okay. Now, before you guys all run off, by the way, you 20 and 30-year-old studs out there who I'm hoping buy some of this stuff, please don't run out and the door and do your next killer app, because there's a couple other things got to tell you. Technology this is just philosophy. Technology is not by nature good. It can be every bit as bad as good. My personal belief, it's neutral. Okay? Believe this. Technology makes things that are far, far away very, very close. Technology makes things that are very, very close far, far away. This is the curse of our world. We have all this ability, but we have lost our sense of intimacy. We've lost our sense of our ability to connect eyeball to eyeball, flesh to flesh as human beings. You can build virtual community all you want. It's not real. If you want to build real community, if you want to rebuild, reimagine Toledo, people have to be together around a table, in dialogue, in conversation, where they're at risk and they don't have the answers, and where they're learning and where we're not giving them answers, they're getting the questions and they can kind of figure things out. So I think Steve Jobs thought like this. Don't just use technology, bend it, grab it and twist it. Twist it to your will. Twist it to the purpose that you have. Don't just accept what's coming. Use it for good. Use it for a purpose that's not just about making money, but that makes you feel good about yourself. A human being won't do this for money, but they'll die if there's meaning and purpose for them. Now, I'll go through the whole range here, but you do this, You'll not only reimagine yourself, you'll reimagine Toledo. Final point, okay? The most important thing you need in business, beyond just the core idea and beyond this what I'm going to say, a purpose like a cathedral. What you need is people. And let's face it, the perception that we have, our self-image and our self-esteem is that we're not all that smart. We're maybe a day late and $1 short. This is Jeep world. We're the glass capital of the world. Hell, we probably haven't been for 40 years. But what do we got? Well, here's the God's truth. Of all the initial founding people who built what was Root learning and is now Root, every damn one of them but one was from here. They're from Toledo. They weren't all PhDs and rocket scientists. They were here. But they had what you can't buy, but we don't value it enough. Okay? If you start hiring people, particularly young people, because you need them. You got laptop, this technology, it's undeniable. You need young people who can go without sleep, and you feed them caffeine. That's the way it is. If you need a lot of sleep, you can't deal with this stuff. What you look for is what you can't buy. First of all, you look for people who have self-esteem. Nobody can teach you. Nobody can teach you that. You get that from yourself. That's your opinion of yourself. You can't teach people values. These are crucial things. You get those from your mom, dad, maybe a coach along the way. Can't teach. There's something else you can't teach. Hunger, desire. Okay, I'm going to call this economic libido. You either got it or you don't. Nobody's going to teach you that. We got all that here. You can't teach people to really want to be in a team and collaborate. You know, back in the day, most didn't. Most people don't want. These are all essential components and ingredients. What we found when we started looking around and stumbling around, what I in particular found, we're loaded with it. All of our people, in fact, were from Toledo area. That's the first thing. And second, they all had a sense of mission and purpose. Truth be told, a disproportionate share of them were Catholic. I wasn't. I was not. But what I saw was people who were willing to subordinate their agenda and their will and to pursue something that was highly collaborative, that was team-oriented, that was loaded with emotional payback, which made them feel good about themselves, and therefore they were willing to throw themselves into the unknown and do things back in the day that were virtually impossible, to deal with issues that were unbelievably complex. How do you cost justify a semiconductor plant? How does the American healthcare system work? What's the commercial path? What's the path of a commercialization of a pharmaceutical drug? These are normal Toledo kids in their 20s and 30s over time, testing stuff, having their ass kicked constantly, figuring this stuff out, picking themselves off the floor again and again, and ultimately rendering these beautiful products that they were able to sell globally. So it's quite possible. That's my little spiel. I think the essence that I would like to suggest is imagination with technology, with intersection, and you don't have to do that out of town. We are loaded with the people that can do that. Thank you.